This is the 2023 Honda SCL500, the newest addition to the Honda 500 lineup. The difference here is you get that scrambler look. Now, is that design enough to make this bike something you're going to want to keep around when that newness wears off? And what is Honda really trying to accomplish with this bike? Now, I'll start by saying that Honda is honest in that this is not an off-road machine. It pays homage to the CL72 of the early 60s. That was really the first street scrambler motorcycle and popularly known for being the bike that was taken down into Baja, is really what was the genesis of the Baja 1000. In this case, you're getting styling that kind of brings back all of those feelings and emotions, but it's still gonna be an on-road motorcycle based on the Rebel 500. Now let's look at some of the changes that are gonna make this machine what it is. We're gonna start with the engine because this thing is an absolute gem. There's a reason why Honda has built so many bikes around this platform. It is really fuel efficient, smooth, and has just enough power. So it is the 471cc engine that you're gonna find in the Rebel 500. There is a really small difference to the air intake on this bike, mostly because of the difference at the tail of this bike. The packaging is just gonna be a little bit different, but it is essentially the engine that you're finding in the Rebel 500. The last Rebel 500 we had on the dyno made just about 41 horsepower. Gives you a rough idea of what you're working with this bike. What we really like about this engine is just how smooth it is and how user-friendly it is. Anyone from a new rider can jump on this bike and be comfortable with the throttle application, with how it makes power. It's not overwhelming. And yet there is just enough power for the more experienced rider to jump on this thing and not really get tired of the thing as they start doing longer rides. Now, today we rode this bike about 110 miles, mix of highway, back roads, city street stuff. Its happy place is right at about 60 miles per hour. Now, it will run about 75, 80, 6 gear when you're on the highway. You do start to get a little bit of vibration at that point, but you can get this thing on the highway, still have enough power to make passes, get around cars. Again, that sweet spot's gonna be right around the 60 mile per hour mark, and it's an absolute gem around town. Now, the other thing we wanna talk about as it relates to that package is the slip assist clutch. Honda's really proud of this clutch, and for good reason. The clutch pull is extremely light. That's gonna be nice for newer riders who are just getting comfortable. They don't have to fight that stiff clutch pull. And it's just nice if you're putting a lot of miles on this bike, a lot of city street riding, stoplight to stoplight. You're not gonna feel that in your forearms. Just makes this bike an easy bike to ride around town. Now, we briefly mentioned it, but this engine is really fuel efficient. We did about 110 miles today. Now, the fuel gauge was only at about half level. So am I saying you're gonna do 200 plus miles on this thing? No, not necessarily, but there's enough range in this motorcycle that you're not gonna be constantly stopping at a gas station. You're not stopping all the time if you're using this bike to commute back and forth to work every day. Now, we already know that that engine is really good. It's a proven package, but what is new in this case is the chassis. Well, I should say new because the frame itself, the main frame, is directly off the Rebel 500. The only difference is in the subframe. It's going to open the door to this taller and longer seat. We really like this over, for instance, the Rebel 500 because you've just got more room to move around. Now, that was a big thing that Honda wanted to focus on with this bike, is just having a really user-friendly rider triangle, a natural riding position. That's gonna both add to the comfort on this bike, but also add to that kind of scrambler feel. Now, that is aided by this tall handlebar. It's a really neutral position. Really enjoyed the feel of this thing. You sit really upright, and it's just a comfortable machine to ride around. Again, about 110 miles today, plenty comfortable. The only thing I will say from an ergonomics perspective is that this seat is a little bit thin and does buzz just a bit. Now, we did try one of Honda's accessory seats. It adds a little bit of height, and there is that more padding, so it's gonna give you a little bit more cushion. that cushion does also dampen some of those vibrations a little bit. So something to consider both for taller riders and people looking to give this thing a little bit different look or feel. I do want to add that while this high mount exhaust adds to that scrambler styling, it does interfere a little bit when you're riding the bike. For me, about a size 12 foot, my boot was rubbing on the heat shield a little bit. And also I did try standing up on this bike. Say maybe you did want to go off-road riding and you're thinking about getting up on the bike. Your leg actually ends up interfering with the exhaust there. So again, Honda says this is not a bike that they developed for off-road riding, so you're probably not going to be out doing that. If you still were thinking about going off-road with this thing, definitely something to keep in mind. I will say that Vance and Hines was here today. They've already got an aftermarket exhaust for this thing. It's a lot more compact, it sounds good, and that might be something that people are going to look at for this bike. Now from a handling perspective, what we really like about this bike is how lightweight and nimble it is. It is very agile. Honda says that was definitely something they were going for with this thing. That's gonna help the new rider because it just makes it an easier bike to ride, but it also makes it a little bit more lively and fun around town. You're not fighting this thing steering into corners, especially if you're out in the canyons. It's really fun in a tighter section. The one thing that holds this bike back is the suspension. It is really soft. It's non-adjustable in the front. You do have preload adjustability in the rear, but it moves around a lot when you're in the middle of the corner and putting input into the bike, especially if you're on a bumpy road. It really dictates how fast you can go. Again, this is not gonna be a bike for attacking a canyon road or riding really aggressive. It's gonna be more for the guy who just wants to cruise around town, get off in the back roads, enjoy the scenery, kind of cruise at a mellow pace. Moving on to the electronics, this is gonna be super easy because, well, there really aren't any electronics. There is ABS. It functions as you'd expect. I really think ABS is important to have on motorcycles these days because really it just gives you that extra safety net. The weather turns on you, you're on wet roads, gravel in the middle of a corner, things like that. So functions normally. There's nothing else to really focus on there. No ride modes, definitely no TC or anything like that. So the dash on this thing, it leaves a little bit to be desired. I think Honda could have done something with this thing, make it a little bit more exciting for you. There's no color, it's really dim, dark. So yes, it gets the job done. It gives you the information you need. But when you're spending money on a new motorcycle like this, it's 2023, let's pump a little bit of style and niceness into that thing. So what does all that mean? Well, it means that if you were looking for an off-road scrambler, a bike that you're gonna go out and really explore the desert or the mountains on, this probably isn't that bike. And again, that's probably okay because that's really not what Honda was trying to build. They're just trying to give riders more options and something that really speaks to them from a styling standpoint. And in that sense, this bike is a success. It is really well designed. It's got Honda fit and finish. It's fuel efficient, it's fun, it's lightweight. And the best part about it is that there's gonna be a really strong aftermarket for this. And you're gonna be able to build this bike into what you want it to be. And I think in that sense, you have a bike that you're gonna be able to live with for a long time because it's gonna be your bike. It's gonna be what you make it. And ultimately, that's what makes this bike cool and what I think is gonna keep this bike in people's garage for a long time. Now, the SCL500 is already on dealer floors. Retail is $6,800. Go check it out if that scrambler styling speaks to you. And that's it from our first ride on the Honda SCL500. If you like what we're doing, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe. Hey, and if you got questions, drop us a comment. We'll try to get you an answer. We'll see you on the next one.